I'll sign off. Jim is the communications director. Is it Yeah. I'm sure your role entails a little bit more than that.
I'm muted, so that's very Is that better? Normally I'm not very muted, yeah, because I'm a communications director. That's what goes with the job, really, isn't it? Yeah. So, but I am loud, so don't put me up too high.
I'm going to get out of the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, it's lovely to be with you again. I think it's been about a year and a half since I was here last. So many familiar faces. Some churches get me back again and again, and this is one of them. So it's lovely to come back. Always good to drive up the A12 when you've lived up the A12, and you kind of feel you left a bit of yourself behind when you drove down it. With a removal van. So it's lovely to come back. But I don't want to take you up the A12, I want to take you to Europe. And I want to think about two countries in Europe this morning where we're working. One where the missionaries we're supporting are finding it really tough and could do with your help, but I'll come back to that. And the other where they're enjoying great encouragement. So there's sort of two ends of the spectrum. First of all, Poland. This is Andrzej and Monika Kempczynski. As you can tell, they're Polish. They come from, well, Monika comes from up on the coast, and Andrzej comes from Warsaw. They came over to Britain. I don't know if I've ever told you about them before, but they came over to Britain for Andrzej to train for ministry at London Seminary. Then they became members at Tottenham, and they were sent back to plant a church in Legionowo. Legionowo is a garrison town, as the name implies, legion, you know, Roman legions and all that sort of thing. They meet in a little suite of rooms. They'd love to have your facilities, but they rent a suite of offices above a pizza shop and a hairdresser's. Okay, so very useful on certain occasions. The pizza shop, not the hairdressers. Andrzej shaves his head, so I don't think the hairdressers is of great help to him. And in that little place, you'll get maybe, you know, their congregation this morning, they'd be thrilled if they had these front 4 rows, okay? Can you turn me down a bit? I'm feeling very echoey, yeah? I'm not used to such volume. I like to project my voice. Yeah, so imagine preaching to the same-ish 10 people every week. That's a challenge, isn't it? But when they started, there were just 4 of them, and that was 8 years ago. And over that time, they've had people come to them and go and come and go. Because if you've grown up in Catholicism in Poland, and then you've come to faith in Christ as an evangelical Christian, then not being in a big sort of, institutionalized denomination, a state church, but being in a small group, being committed to a small group is hard. Do you see what I'm saying? That people, having been under the authority of a priest, don't want to be under anybody's authority, and they want to sort of wander from church to church. So they have lots of people who come and go, very few people who stick. Probably the core of their group in terms of committed members is about 6 people, and there's about another 6 added on who are newbies, 1 or 2 who may be coming forward for baptism, which is fantastic. And occasionally they'll get visitors. This was a day where they had the guy in the suit as a pastor from another church visiting and brought some people with him, and they get excited when they get into double figures. Do you imagine doing church in that situation? And you are the only church in a town of 50,000 people. What's the population of Hadley? 10,000, 15,000? 10? Just under 10. You're nearly an urban area, all right? You get 10,000 and you're an urban area. But they're 50,000 people in Legionowo, and as far as we know, they are the only evangelical group in the whole town. And it's a big dormitory suburb for, dormitory town for Warsaw, so it's a nice, well-to-do kind of place. Getting the gospel out and known in that situation is a big challenge. So they do lots of literature distribution. They do a book table in the middle of town. They put on lots of events. Last year and the year before, they had a team, an Envision team from GBM, who went to help them. Some of you may have got to know Artur Piotrowski in the red T-shirt there, who was over in Sudbury and doing things in various Suffolk churches. He's now down in Kent. So some of the team were Polish speakers. Some of them clearly weren't, but they kind of got on together and they ran a holiday Bible club. So here's the meeting room, and they packed 20 children into it. Mostly sort of what we would call Key Stage 2, edging over into Key Stage 3, and nearly all boys. For a reason. They did football after they'd done their Bible stories, so all the boys wanted to come along. But there they were with their songs. There were a couple of girls who were brave enough to come, and those who didn't want to do football could do all sorts of crafts like we do in Holiday Club and so on. That's Mateo. He seems to have taken a bit of a battering, doesn't he? Their son, obviously taken a battering in the football. But it was lovely to see how they were gelling with this team. Here's a couple of church planters, and they've got maybe 3 or 4 other Christians committed around them and a fringe. And so to have a team of Christians come in who are all committed to working with them to double that sort of active core is just a tremendous opportunity. They did the life of Joseph. So there's Arthur dressed up. Is he Pharaoh or is he Joseph? I'm not sure. But it's a good rig out, and they put a lot into it. And on the Friday evening, just like you would, they invite all the families along. Now, the reason I'm plugging this is we're planning a team for this July. And we've got some spaces. If you speak Polish, tell me why you shouldn't go. But if you don't speak Polish, that's not a problem. There are opportunities to go and serve. It's a week, the week that bridges July into August, and we're looking to recruit a couple more people to help us on that team. And you will notice from the team that quite a few people are my age group. I was going to say 40s, but I can't. 40s, 50s, that sort of age group. We've got one applicant who's at uni, and we'd love someone else young to join her, but we just need a couple more people for the team to Poland. The wonderful thing about the team to Poland is that out of that, the first year that they did it, came a youth group, which the church had never had before. And so there they are doing the great sanctified Christian sports of table football and table tennis and all the rest of it, and then getting down to play games at a table and then having a Bible talk and trying to deal with some of the sort of worldview issues that young people have and answer their questions and take it carefully and build a friendship with these young people. At the moment, they're only doing that once a month, but they'd love to go to once a fortnight and ramp it up. So do pray for that group of young people, that God will be at work in their hearts, and that maybe they will be some of the first spiritual fruit in this particular church. Now, Latvia, which is sort of northeast of Poland and going up the Baltic coast, is a country where we've worked for something like 25 years as a mission. Malcolm and Ruth Firth, this couple up here. Malcolm was my best man, I was his best man. He and Ruth went to Latvia in 1996, and they worked with a Russian-speaking church, and they learnt Russian, and they worked with an international church that needed a lot of work and shaping. And then, 7 years ago, they started a new church in their neighborhood in Riga. They started with 4 people. They discovered there was a refugee center in their neighborhood, so they went and discovered a whole load of Congolese refugees, and they came along and swelled the numbers, and very quickly what was setting out to be a Latvian church became an international church, because they're in a city and there's people coming and going all the time. And they were crying out for workers because the workers really grown and prospered. And so Phil and Lydia Evans, who met when they became leaders of our Envision team to Latvia in 2015, life rushed on for them. By the time they led the team in 2016, they were already married. They'd never met before they started leading the team in 2015. 2016, they married, and they went to EMF last year to do their Bible training from January to July, and then they went out in January of this year. Here's their commissioning down in Penzance back in January, and they've arrived in Serbia. When you get your GBM Herald, you can read the joyful story of Phil ironing everything while he waited. There's a wonderful story in the Herald about Phil worried that they're never going to get their flat. And so in the flat they're staying in for a month, he's ironing everything in the flat twice, just to get over the nerves, while he waits for the phone to ring and say, yes, you've got your flat. So you can read the joy of what it's like to get in a new city, try and find a home, and settle down in a church which has got oodles of opportunities coming out of their ears. So there are international students who come to Latvia to study. They are reaching out to those international students. Some of them, as you can see, come from Asia, some of them come from Africa, some of them come from other cities in Europe, and so on. So all nations coming together. On a Saturday night, they run a Bible study, which Phil leads. and they're getting stuck into that. Lydia is doing one-to-one Bible studies with a number of the women in the church. And generally, you can just sense the way in which Mezchem International Baptist Church, or is it Grace Church Mezchem, I think it now calls itself, is a dynamic disciple-making place where they have people there for a short period of time. Maybe they're just there for the 3 years that they're studying, and they're seeking to invest in their lives and maybe send them back as disciples to countries that might be quite close to the gospel, and to see the work of God flourish there. And what they're trying to do in their service is not just require that everybody speaks English. If you go to an international church on holiday in Europe, you'll encounter lots of churches like I will in Brussels in July, where it's all in English and everybody has to learn English to come there. In Mezchem in Riga, they translate into French, they translate into Arabic or Syrian, they translate into Iranian. They want to get people in clusters, in different groups, and they particularly translate into Chinese. They've got a couple there, the Habibis, who, as the name suggests, come from Syria. They're jewelers from Syria, and they've fled for their lives to Latvia. That's a place that's been welcoming to them, and the church have enabled them to start a business, Habibi Jewelry. And you can help their business by buying some of their jewelry online. It's an online business, and you can help them make a living. But you'll also notice in this picture there's lots of Chinese people. The Latvian government has an arrangement whereby if you come and invest 5,000 euros, they're in the Eurozone, 5,000 euros in the Latvian economy, you can be given leave to remain because you've invested your money. And because that opportunity is a bit sort of hit and miss between different European states, people are drawn to Latvia who want to do business elsewhere in Europe from China. So husband and wife move to Latvia. Husband keeps his business going back in China and maybe back there for half the year, but he uses Latvia as his base to do business elsewhere in Europe. And these are people coming from inland China, where there's far less Christian presence, and they're hearing the gospel through their network of Chinese friends for the first time. And the wonderful thing, therefore, is that in amongst all this group of Chinese people, people are being saved. And some of the group are mature Christians, and they are discipling the rest of the Chinese Christians, those who are coming to faith, and evangelizing those who don't yet know the Lord, and doing all of that through Mandarin, through their own language. And when they have a baptism, they always do it in the sea, because they haven't got a baptistry in the place where they meet. And the sea is not always frozen in Latvia. In the summer, it's probably warmer, dare I say it, warmer than Aldeburgh or Walberswick, yeah? Not hard to be warmer, is it really? But so they go down every summer, and they're planning baptisms again for this summer. They've got people asking for baptism. And in Latvia, whenever you have a celebration, you present someone with, what is it, a rose or a carnation. You always do that to your teachers at the end of the year. You give them flowers. They love flowers. And so someone gets baptized, you give them a flower. It's a very Latvian thing to do. So do pray for Malcolm, who's not holding the flower, and Ruth as they seek to lead this church. They've carried a lot of that leadership fairly single-handedly, really, as the church has got going. Now they've got a team of workers with them, and they're seeking to raise up Latvians and Chinese and others to be part of the leadership of the church. Pray for the many other ministries that they're trying to develop, which you can read about in the latest edition of the Herald. And you can go there. You can help. We are looking to recruit lots of people for our Latvia team this year. So far, we've only got 2 plus Phil and Lydia. So there's room for another 4. If you're free at the end of August and the first week of September, why not spend a week with guys as funny and enthusiastic as these guys? Some of you may know Joe Grimwood from Grundisborough and Cambridge. Joe's working with me for a year this year with GBM. He's out in Serbia at the moment. But you can see, lots of different national backgrounds there. Lots of British people from all sorts of ethnic backgrounds, Kenyan and Nigerian and so on, all mixing together to reach out to students. The first week of September is Freshers Week in Riga. So they go out to do Freshers Week outreach in all the 4 different universities and to use photo cards to get conversations going and all sorts of creative ways to get evangelistic conversations started, and trying to befriend people to get them into the regular ministries of the church. So perhaps you could be doing that. You could be out there making conversations with people in English on the campuses where a lot of English is spoken, because in Riga, 60% speak Latvian and 40% speak Russian, and they refuse to learn each other's languages, so they learn English. So there's a sort of an advantage in Riga, a sort of language triangle, which means you could serve there. So if you'd like to go on either of those teams, come and talk to me afterwards over coffee. You have lots of coffee in your church, don't you? And I can tell you more. There's leaflets on the table out there to tell you about that. And do pray for both those situations, which is what we're going to do now.